So today I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the important writings of our great teacher, Dogen Zenji, which we've been doing now for more than a year, and a few other things will be included, but the chapter is called Senjo, Washing and Purifying. So, along with other things, I'll talk about what is washing. Why is it worthy of a great Zen master's time and writing skills? So obviously, it's an action of great importance. It's something that we choose to do, and it's rather small. And it's something, like a lot of small things, it's something that has a beginning, has a middle, and may come to an end. Sometimes we might start projects that we don't bring to an end, relying on others to bring them to an end. But this is one that it's a small activity, and the benefits are much larger than they appear when we're doing it. Sometimes it can even feel trivial, or maybe we skip it, but part of what Zen practice is about is understanding that small actions, however small, have significance. They matter, and they have repercussions. So I was also going to talk about the election. I'm glad it's on many minds, because recently we had a runoff here in our district, and I voted. It was really an adventure, because Gaelyn and her daughter Theo had come for a visit, and they said, "We're going to vote. Would you like to go to vote?" And it was my first adventure out in this situation. So we drove to a place on 14th Street, and they actually have curbside voting. So they brought this giant box out, put it in my lap, and I voted. And so the person I voted for actually won. And so in our district, there are more than 300,000 eligible voters, okay? And the person I voted for, who happened to win, won by, I think, 2/3 of those who voted. Of that 300,000, how many do you think actually voted? 4%. Less than 4%. 13,000 something people. And he won by 7,000 votes. Little more than 13,000 people voted. Isn't that amazing? So you've just heard 2 reminders, and you'll get more reminders. This voting thing of democracies really counts. One of the hard things about living in Houston compared to where I've lived before is that finding out when to vote and where to vote is really hard in Houston. The announcements don't come to us. And when I lived elsewhere, you're deluged with these postcards telling you, here's when to vote, they don't even necessarily tell you who to vote for, but they tell you when, where, what it is. Here, nothing. So it's on us to figure out where to vote and what the issues are, and to inform ourselves. And then it's also okay to inform your friends. Do some research and inform your friends. So people who don't have time to figure out what the issues are and how to think about them, ask your friends. Ask the friends that you trust. So you could ask me, but I have to be careful. So again, this vote actually, you're kind of isolated. I think you're isolated. They make you. They want you to have privacy, so it feels a little bit isolated. But it's a statement of your commitment to community. You know that it matters. You want to be involved in the community. You want to take care of the community. So again, many things that we do are things that we initiate and think about and then bring to conclusion. I was so happy that I brought to conclusion my day of voting. Things like that. But a lot of big projects we may initiate, we've got the idea, and we rely on others to finish them, which is fine. We're not isolated. In fact, I was thinking about last week, or earlier in January, I was thinking about Martin Luther King and the influences on his fabulous practice. And one of the influences was the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr. Have you heard of him? very influential in my time. But he really thought about the responsibility of caring people and how caring people get involved in action, social action. He was big on social action, and he wrote something about that. This idea of projects that we get involved in but don't necessarily complete. He said, "Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime." That puts things in perspective. Yeah, we're kind of, maybe a little bit, some of us, biased toward thinking, I've got to start this and it has to be done, otherwise it's hopeless. No, nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. But we make a little step. We add to the trajectory. And then he said, therefore, nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. We kind of depend on history to represent the meaning of what we do. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our standpoint. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from somebody else's standpoint as it is from our standpoint. Well, that was really good, what I just did. Therefore, we must be saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. So he, again, was a very influential thinker, important to Martin Luther King, and because of his ability to be realistic about the conflicting historical forces that we're all moved by. And we want to solve it right now. And if we can't solve it right now, we think it's hopeless. It's going to be solved in the future. Therefore, we rely on hope and love and faith. He also wrote something you may have heard. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You recognize that? Yeah. For for a couple of decades, that was known as the AA prayer, until finally people said, he wrote that. So now he gets credit for having written an early version of that. Really nice. So, but this complexity of our time, complexity of influences on us is really amazing, opening a paper, listening to the news, watching the news. We are expected to, or we think we ought to, weave together in our consciousness things that are happening around the globe and bring some kind of coherent images to our minds. It's really amazing what's happening to our minds. And recently, Reverend Shojin, Vicki Glenn, and I went to a concert, a kind of a recital, beautiful soprano voice and an amazing pianist. And it itself is nourishing. To go and be in live music is really nourishing. And it's also nourishing to be with a group of people who like the kind of music you like, because they're all appreciating it too. It's just music. We're musical animals. So it was really, really beautiful. And at the beginning, Julia Bullock, who was the soprano, gave an introduction, because the music is kind of complex, and the words of the poems are kind of fragmented. And she said, what we are experiencing is fractured reality. So these words of the poems are fractured. And I really stopped and thought about it. In fact, I borrowed a pen from Vicki to write that down in the program, this sense of fractured reality and what that means. So if I'm walking along a beach and I hear a loud bird call, it fits into the reality. But if I hear like honking horns or something, it's fractured. Or if I'm here in the Zendo and I hear birds outside, it fits in. Or I hear my friends breathing, it fits in. But there are other noises that could happen, and it breaks that feeling of being in a unified reality. So what is it that's fractured, actually? It's the mind. The mind breaks these things up and separates them. So as an example, I wanted to tell you what for example, some of the lines, although they were spoken in French and Quechua from Peru. So here's one of the examples in English from the song called The Sleeping Town. The sleeping town, thou, my hand on thy heart by thee, the bench in the depth of the midnight, thou, the double violet, thou, the eye immobile, thy gaze unwavering, me. She described that as fractured, and I think so. And you can see the play going back between me and my concern with me, concern with you, concern with me. The sleeping town, thou, my hand on thy heart by thee, the bench in the depth of midnight, thou, the double violet, thou, the eye immobile, thy gaze unwavering, me. Isn't that nice? And of course, sung by a beautiful soprano voice, it was incredible. So you kind of don't you don't worry about the fracturedness of the words. Before I get to talking about the cleansing, some of what this has to do with is, as many of you know, one of the fundamental teachings of Zen and of Mahayana Buddhism is the two truths. We have two truths. And one truth is the truth that we live in called conventional reality, the truth of conventional reality. And then there's this truth of ultimate reality. And both of them in Zen are true. So we could say that the first truth, in the truth of conventional reality, things appear, and they appear to be changing all the time. Things appear to be sometimes satisfactory, sometimes unsatisfactory. There's a separation between what I consider myself and what I consider others, and change, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, conventional reality. One of the kind of useful definitions of conventional is that we have agreed on these truths by a convention. We've gotten together and we've agreed on the names of things. Each other's names, dogs' names, objects, what objects are used for, the truth of conventional reality. Very important, we inhabit that. And then there's this other truth in all sacred practices, and Zen calls it the truth of ultimate reality, which is that even within conventional reality, there's interconnectedness, there's this flow, this unbroken, unfractured experience of the sacred running through all things, getting a glimpse of what runs through all things. This is ultimate truth. And it's considered a very nice part of spiritual practice when you get that glimpse of this sacred flow that's happening through all things. I think a couple of talks ago, someone talked about this other word that we use a lot in Zen called thusness. So for some of you, you haven't heard this as a word in ordinary language, that things are thus. And that's a kind of old translation. I wish we had a better one. But when we're aware of both those truths, we're aware of conventional reality. So I could be aware of Roberta as conventional definition, and Tim as conventional definition. What's your name?
Bijal.
Bijal? Bijal, nice to meet you. So the three of them look like separate beings, but in ultimate reality, if you're also aware that there's this interconnected flow of our life together, are aware of that, and that each of those individuals is way more vast in their meaning and connections on this earth than just those simple names, Bijal, Tim, Roberta. They're way more vast. So when we're aware of the conventional separate reality and the ultimate reality, kind of at the same time, that's thus. So in thusness, that's how things exist. They appear to be separate in conventional reality, and they're part of this gigantic flow. That's called thusness, the timeless flow of ultimate reality. So now back to washing, cleansing, and purifying, senjo. So this writing is fairly long and detailed. It's a description of how to engage in this important activity of cleansing. And part of the reason I wanted to put this chapter in the context of the two truths and the meaning of life is that when he gets down into the nitty-gritty of cleansing, it's pretty detailed. It's pretty detailed about how you should behave in the restroom. And I told Stephen, our administrator, that I was going to be talking about this, and very detailed instructions about what you do in a restroom. Of course, in a monastic restroom of the 13th century, which is a lot different from an American modern one. And he said, "Oh, I loved reading that. It's so detailed." He said, "I couldn't understand those 7 balls of dirt that you roll up as part of the cleaning process." So, very detailed. But in our lives, it's possible to think, it's possible, probably none of you do, that when we do these kind of mundane activities, private, there's a rip in reality. I'm practicing here in the Zendo, but when I go and wash the dishes, trim my nails, go into the restroom, well, I'm not practicing, I'll just let my mind go. But what Dogen was saying, you can have your practice be continuous. You can have your mindfulness be continuous. It's not that these rules are meant to be bad. It's just that he's explaining there is a way. There is a way. And we can make up our own way. It's just that there is a way. And we all know there are ways in our own households. You go to somebody else's household, it's a little bit different. You try to maintain what they do. So Dogen, and then Suzuki Roshi also had a chapter in his second book called The Stinky Restroom. He said, it was mostly talking about clearing the mind, but he also said, for the rest of our lives, we have to keep going to the stinky restroom. And he tied it more to the fact that we take things into our minds and we have to let things out. We have to house clean. So he tied that to the restroom behavior. We take things into our body and we have to let things out. So that's one way that he was turning it into a practice. But in this chapter, he starts, because he's Dogen, with a koan, a Zen story of great importance. It's one of our great Soto Zen ancestors, Nanyue, visiting the 6th ancestor in China. So Zen had already come from India to China, and it had been there for 6 generations. And then this sincere Chinese monk went to see this great teacher, the 6th ancestor. So the 6th ancestor asked him, does it nevertheless depend on practice and realization? How'd you like that? You go and visit a great teacher. Does it depend, nevertheless, on practice and realization? And Nanyue said, it's not that it lacks practice and realization, but it can't be defiled by them. And then the 6th ancestor said, just this not defiled is what the Buddhas bear in mind. You are like this, you are thus. I am also like this, I am thus. Down to all the ancestral masters in the West, they are also like this. Okay? So it's good to know that Dogen is, when he starts off that way, he's really overestimating us. He's assuming that we already know this story and that he's just given us the second half. So thank you, Dogen. However, he's just assuming everybody knows all the stories he knows. So it really began with an earlier the same dialogue, the same great Nanyue is visiting the sixth ancestor, but here's the full story. The sixth ancestor, so Nanyue comes in to the room to see, just like this, except usually they're standing up in the big rooms in China. They're standing up. Maybe the teacher is probably sitting down in a big fancy chair. I was telling Yoshin this morning, the big fancy chairs are red, just like my walker. So he was probably sitting down and saw this sincere Chinese monk coming up to him. And he said, what is it that thus comes? What thing that comes like this? What thing comes like this? So in the back of his mind, perhaps he was wondering, who is this monk? Is he going to answer from conventional reality or ultimate reality? And neither answer is wrong. He just wanted to see. And the monk said, to say it's like anything wouldn't hit the mark. That's a good answer, isn't it? He's refusing to be defined, or he's saying it really can't be defined. There's this conventional me and the ultimate me. To say it's anything wouldn't hit it. So you could say that when somebody says, what's your name? To say it's anything, go ahead, say it.
To say it's anything would not hit the mark.
Oh, okay. Oh, you must be one of those Zen people. And then the sixth ancestor asked him, okay, what is it that does come? To say it's like anything wouldn't hit the mark. And then the sixth ancestor probably paused and said, does it nevertheless depend on practice and realization? Even though you can't define it, doesn't it depend on practice and realization? Doesn't it? And Nanyue said, it's not that it lacks practice and realization, but it can't be defiled by them. So that's setting the context of this whole discussion of cleansing. Really, it's like, what is it to be defiled and not defiled? To give yourself, he's saying, if I were to say, my name's Nanyue and I'm from, I don't know, Beijing, that's a form of defilement. It can be. So I'm limiting myself. And so in this writing, we are already exploring this question of what is the nature of reality? What does it mean to wash something that's already pure? To define yourself wouldn't hit the mark. And this essence of a human can't be defiled by our practice. So our practice isn't about removing defilements. Our practice is about removing the delusion that it's not defiled already. Okay? So throughout this writing, Dogen keeps... So nice to see these faces. Hi, guys. He keeps weaving together these two themes of what is non-defilement along with the precise way of caring for things. If we say it's undefiled, well then I don't have to do anything about it. But actually, it's undefiled and I have to take precise care of it. So here's one of the paragraphs, one of the instructions. Dogen writes, to cleanse your body means to wash away the excrement and urine and to cut your 10 fingernails. He says, thus, even if the body and mind are undefiled, there are methods of cleansing the body, cleansing the mind. It is not only cleansing the body and mind, but also cleansing the entire land, cleansing the places of meditation under trees. Even if the land is not polluted, cleansing it is the intention of all Buddhas. They do not turn their backs on it or give it up, even after they reach the Buddha fruit. They do not turn their backs on this cleansing, even after they reach the Buddha fruit, realize Buddhahood. And then he quotes from the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra. There's a chapter called Pure Conduct. Have you gotten to that, Constance? Okay. It has all sorts of gathas, phrases to say. So naturally, it talks about Here's from the Avatamsaka Sutra, one of our most important Zen sutras. When you defecate and urinate, vow to remove defilement and become free from greed, hate, and ignorance, together with all sentient beings. When you arrive at the water, which is what the word that was used for the place of cleansing, when you arrive at the water, vow to go toward the unsurpassable way and attain the Dharma beyond worldly affairs, together with all sentient beings. When you cleanse with the water, vow to embody pure patience and become fully undefiled, together with all sentient beings. And then this is the actual gata from the sutra. And this, often in monasteries, you'll see these little verses posted all over the place. Be posted in the restroom. There would be verses posted next to the sink where you brush your teeth. There's a verse for everything from the Avatamsaka Sutra. This is the verse. Doing what is needed to relieve myself, I pray all living beings may be rid of filth and pollution and free from lust, anger, and delusion. Having finished going for water, I pray all living beings may approach the unsurpassed way and attain the supramundane Dharma. Using the water to wash away filth, I pray all living beings may be endowed with pure patience and be in the end without impurities. Nice long gata, so no rush. In fact, there is an instruction about not rushing. So water is not intrinsically pure or impure. The body is not intrinsically pure or impure. These things aren't one or the other. All things, all dharmas are like this. Not intrinsically pure, not intrinsically impure. Water is not sentient or insentient. The body is not sentient nor insentient. All things are like this. They're both living consciousness and inanimate objects. He says, Dogen says now, the teachings of the Buddha, the world-honored one, are also like this. However, it is not that we use water to purify the body. Rather, in maintaining the Buddha Dharma by means of the Buddha Dharma, there is this ceremony, going to the restroom, which is called washing and purifying. It is to be intimate with and directly transmit the one body and mind of the Buddhas and ancestors. It is clearly to sustain the one radiance of the Buddhas and ancestors. These practices of how we take care of the body are clearly to sustain the one radiance of the Buddhas and ancestors. Keeping the nails short, no longer than a grain of barley. I have some barley in case you'd like to borrow some. So in China at that time, there were some long fingernails. Keeping the nails short, no longer than a grain of barley, and keep the head shaved. These are the practices maintained in China for Buddhist monks, and Dogen Zenji earnestly brought them back to Japan. And now in the West, there is a tendency to maintain this practice. But here, even among monastics, there are those who keep their hair long, and the same is true. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. It's long now. And the same is true in Japan and China. It's just something that people do. And it gives us something to talk about. It really does. How often do you shave your head? Do you shave your head? I notice you've stopped shaving your head. And how is that? And how are your fingernails? Let's see. So we talk about that because it's important. The cultural context of all of these practices is really important. So Dogen wrote, because he tends to be rather definite. Again, there are those who grow their hair long, which is also improper. Do not mistakenly think that because it is done by monastics of a great country, China, it is correct practice. My former master, the old Buddha Rujing, had severe words of admonishment for monastics throughout the land who had long hair and long nails. So already in that time, there were monastics throughout the land. Some of them shaved their heads, some of them didn't. And Dogen really wanted to crack down on that. But he couldn't even do it in Japan. It's one of the things we get to talk about. So Dogen said, those who do not keep the tonsure, keep their heads shaved, are neither lay people or monastics. They are beasts. So sorry. From ancient times, who among the Buddhas and ancestors did not keep their heads shaved? Well, a whole bunch of them. I mean, there they are. Anyone at present who does not keep their head shaved truly is a beast. Neely is hiding his head. But you see, when Dogen instructed the assembly this way, there were many in the assembly who weren't shaving their heads. It's just something, it's a very important issue, and again, something that we get to talk about. So, while I was thinking about that part, I was thinking about, I'm so lucky I get to go back and forth to Japan, and I have a lot of Japanese monastic friends. And over the years, and this, now I'm talking about our current political situation also. Over the years, my understanding of Japan has grown more because of my exposure. My understanding of our practice in the West has also grown more because I enter that other culture, which is so different. And my understanding of friends who have a different perspective on what's going on in our country has grown because of exposure. And my understanding of my own perspective grows because of my meetings with other people with a different perspective. I feel I can't really understand my own perspective unless I talk to people who don't share my perspective. If I just continue to talk to people who share my perspective, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower and narrow. And then finally you rebel. It's like, I don't want to just think like you do, even though you agree with me, so I'm moving to the other side. Oh, that reminds me. Oh, never mind. So I really do believe that the way to mend fractures is to go across the fracture and talk to the other side, where we perceive the fractures to be. Go over there and talk. And then we realize the fracture comes from my own mind. The difference in understanding comes from my own limitations in conventional reality. I think through it all, I myself have become more patient, much more patient, and much more open to understanding other cultures' rules. For instance, even in this head shaving practice, I was going to say that in Japan, there's a completely different understanding of the meaning of a shaved-headed woman. Different understanding. They assume it's a monastic. Then in the United States, where a shaved-headed woman can be presented as a scary phenomenon, or people are so nice to me because they assume it's a cancer diagnosis. I didn't know that at first when I moved here. I kept saying, wow, people are so nice to me, Dave. He said, well, you know it's because they think you have cancer. Oh, no, they recognize a Buddhist monk. Oh, no, they don't. So the decision to maintain some of the forms that are comfortable in Japan have to be explored in the context we find ourselves in. If we, those of us who don't shave our heads all the time, spend all of our times with people who know what we're up to, it feels like a validation, continual validation. And then as soon as you go to another place, you realize you're challenging people's reality, and you might even be scaring them. So I have a lot of hats. But now, because of our mutual influence in Japan, they understand more about their own culture because of the things we're choosing to vary over here. And one of the major ones, of course, is that in America, in the West, men and women practice as equals, which is unusual, extremely unusual in Asia, where they're kept separate because of the problems that would arise. So, and the same is true of minor things like cutting the hair. They understand more about the meaning for their own culture, in my experience. Back to Dogen. Dogen says, it is a mistake to think that the Buddhas did not have recommendations for deportment for the toilet room. It's a mistake to think that the Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha, did not have recommendations, which is interesting. So if there's a tendency to think that these kind of, what you call it, OCD Zen people made up these rules, no, the Buddhas also continued practice through all the activities of a day and all the activities of the body. So his closing advice is this: as long as we are not clear on these matters, when we go to found a monastery or a Zen center, I added that part, as long as we are not clear on these matters, when we go to found a monastery and practice the Buddha Dharma, we will make many mistakes. We will not be endowed with the deportment of a Buddha, and the Bodhi, the awakening of a Buddha, will not have appeared. So one of the sayings in Zen is that it's the deportment, the most important thing in Zen is the deportment of a Zen practitioner. So as long as we are not clear on these matters, when we go to found a monastery or Zen center and practice the Buddha Dharma, we will make many mistakes, will not be endowed with the deportment of a Buddha, and the awakening of a Buddha will not have appeared. The fact that the Buddha Dharma of the great master, Buddha Shakyamuni, has now been transmitted widely in the 10 directions means that the Buddha body and mind are manifest. At the very time the Buddha body and mind are manifest, this is what it is like. And that's how he closes it. And we wonder, is that true? This is what it is like. And I thought, yeah, it's true. This is what it is like. So this is an invitation, this writing is an invitation to take our awareness and our practice into every activity. The stinky restroom, as Suzuki Roshi said, confrontations, demonstrations, discussions with our friends. We take our practice into all of it. It doesn't necessarily get left behind. And we may even forget that it's with us, and all of a sudden, I'll remember the conventional reality and the ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is always flowing through this activity. And the radiant light of practice continuously shines.